Well, Cyrus Ryan, thank you very much for sitting down today with me to discuss your work and your life. Um, Maybe you could just take a moment to introduce yourself to the listeners briefly.
Certainly. Pleasure to be here with you, Greg. Just looking forward to this. Again, my name is Cyrus Ryan. I'm a director of the Northern School of Esoteric Wisdom, which has been running for quite a number of years. It does have a website, just www.northernschoolofelsotericwisdom.com. Easy to find. I've been involved in the esoteric tradition since it's been 40 years now, give or take. I've traveled the world, lived in India, been to Tibet, Nepal, India, China, going to many people like to call sacred places. But I find, for instance, if you're in the Himalayas, especially in Ladakh or Spiti Valley, which are very high altitudes, the whole area is sacred, not one sacred spot. And I met my teacher in 1975, an Asian gentleman who had been awakened in a place called Borobudur, which is in Indonesia, an ancient Buddhist site, when he was 16. And I met him when I was 25, and it was a great awakening. And in 1977, I went to India and had some deep experiences, what they call samadhi, which actually showed me the direction of my path. And from there, it's just been an amazing challenge and awakening after awakening. In 2018, I published my first book, Living on the Inner Edge, an occult practical tale, which entails the beginning of a synthesis of ideas, bringing together theosophical ideas, Buddhist Vajrayana ideas, Fourth Way, and the Yoga Sutras or Raja Yoga, integrating them into one system, which was a work that my teacher had begun, and then I put it down into words. I have a new book coming out called Esoteric Talks, Teachings for the Aquarian Age. Probably won't be out for about 3 or 4 months. It's still in editing. They're taking their time, but it is quite a large book with many short, not too long essays on the deeper aspects of the esoteric tradition, including uh, in the book a couple of other of my students also who are very advanced but clairvoyant, write about some extraordinary experiences that they've had. And so presently, um, I have a couple of small groups. My teaching or the teaching that I give out, it's not my teaching, it's an expression of what I've learned, but is more Aquarian in the group work. The group work is different than working on your own. So uh, in the groups that I have, there are not many people, but the idea of the group work is that you have to be able to surrender a great deal of your personality and work in unison with people you would have no contact with if it wasn't for the esoteric work that brought us together. I've been around for a long time. I'm not young, but my students are. Average age is about 33. And somehow they were drawn to me. And for 5 years ago, this new group is really making a lot of progress, and it's becoming an amazing event or experience. We have full moon meditations in Toronto physically. We have a couple of online uh, segments. One is called Esoteric Talks. It is open to people if they like to get involved. and we talk about a variety of deeper esoteric topics. For instance, now we're looking at the five Dhyani Buddhas, which is the essence of Northern Buddhism, and there's very little literature on it. But my teacher was an expert in the Dhyani Buddhas. Also, from the place where he awakened in Borobudur, that Ho temple is based on the Dhyani Buddhas. Anyways, and then I have another online group that is studying books, but basically the books of Alice A. Bailey. Right now, we're doing letters on occult meditation, having finished Glamour, a World Problem. So we meet every couple of weeks. And then with my other group, the people that live here in this neighborhood in Toronto, we meet quite regularly and meditate together, working as a group to invoke higher energies that an individual could not, but the dynamics of a group through chanting both the sacred word, the Om, and other mantram in a particular fashion invokes higher energies to get deeper insights, both in the teaching and in the service to our, like, service to humanity is based on three factors. One, service to your soul, aligning with your soul, the soul in incarnation with the soul on the higher plane. Few people realize that the soul is dual, that an aspect of the soul incarnates within the human heart, call it the heart chakra. And it is this part that is hidden that awakens. It is not the personality, but the personality with all of its characteristics has to work in coordination with we call it the essential nature or the soul and incarnation. So that's your first service, is this alignment. The second service is the group work. If you're part of a group, supporting the group, being part of the group, helping the group is your group service. And then as in your group service and your soul alignment serves humanity, the group becomes like a shaft of light, piercing through the glamours of our materialistic, technological life and helps to break down past, call them thought forms, past hindrances that hinder the awakening and spiritual growth of humanity. So that's a little bit about myself.
Thank you.
I rambled on a bit.
It's no, no, you're quite busy, so that's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I guess the first question I want to ask is your work, what you teach, the practices that you teach, um, they come from you drawing threads from a number of different teachers, traditions. Would you call this syncretic in the sense that you are like taking pieces from you're not taking like whole traditions and incorporating them. You're taking like practices and methods and teachings from different places and then putting them together to form like a, a body of a new, like, it's not a new teaching, but it's not an old teaching either. It's kind of like a syncretization of older teachings into a new form that is maybe more accessible maybe to modern students. I don't know.
Yeah, you just nailed it on the head, synthesizing an old form into a new form. The ancient teaching or the Sanatana Dharma, the ageless wisdom, doesn't change, but you can change its packaging and its presentation. One of the teachings I enjoy are the teachings of Jetsun Milarepa. He's considered Tibet's greatest yogi, but he or his disciples wrote down his songs. So there's this book, 100,000 Songs of Milarepa. And they're very poetic and beautiful, but hidden in them is deep, very deep teaching, but what he calls the pith instructions. Sometimes if you read a book, you can read page after page. You think you're getting something, but there's not much there. Then there are the odd esoteric book when you read almost every line has something. So the pith instruction is more the essence of the teaching. So what my teacher did, and what I'm following in the same footsteps, is taking the pith, the essence of the teachings from different traditions. Like Milarepa mentioned in one of his songs, you can't learn all of Buddhism. It's so vast. It's like an ocean. You have to be a river and understand the essence of it that enters into the ocean. And even himself, when in his history, if you read, many of the lamas at that time had a lot of difficulty with them because he didn't follow the tradition. He went to the essence, he just cut through to what is necessary. And so that's what I'm working on. And again, just as you said, to make it more accessible for the Western mind. That was the purpose of theosophy initially, to cut through, um, what do you call it, superstitions and the fairy tales of a lot of religion, especially in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and to bring new ideas. But theosophy itself, with all its writing or the secret doctrine, are vast. They're not easy. So we incorporate these kind of thoughts, but come under the tradition of the Trans-Himalayan Brotherhood, the masters of the Trans-Himalayan school, who initiated the effort to move the Dharma from the East to the West. Then later, the teaching of Alice A. Bailey through the Master D.K., again, part of the same school. The purpose was a little deeper when the books came out, more practical. But in the 1930s and 1940s, people didn't know in the West, in North America or Europe, what is meditation? What is mantra? What is even reincarnation? But today, these words have become mainstream. They're in cartoons, they're in stories on movies, etc. Everybody talks, even business people say, I have a mantra. Became more popular in the late 1960s and has gained a lot of momentum. So today's student has a lot of background in these ideas already. You don't want to bore them with, initial trivialities of explaining the path. Somehow they know it already. Right? And a lot of the individuals who are being born, their souls, so far what I found, at least with my students, are Asian souls. They've evolved over many lives in the East. Some as yogis, Buddhist, Hindu, Taoist, what have you. Subconsciously, they know it already. Some are Egyptian. I've also run into from the past magicians who actually have abilities from the past. So you can't give out a teaching that doesn't reach deep inside them. So, for instance, Buddhism is very abstract. The idea of the eight Vijnanas, which is a teaching that few know, that's giving out in the Avantamsaka Sutra and the Lavantamsaka Sutra, I forget the name. but it's abstract because it talks about the different levels of consciousness. People have difficulty understanding what is manovigyana and vigyana, what is it? Manovigyana and alaya vigyana, where the Yoga Sutras are more psychology, dealing with what they call klesas or hindrances. So once you can pass through some of the basics of Sanskrit and seeing that there are 5 modifications of the mind that creates 5 different mental states. So for instance, so we try and look at things psychologically. Say you feel depressed, you feel down. That means you're in a tamasic state. So there are 3 aspects of matter. One is inert or tamas, active rajas, or in harmony, sattva. Very few of us are in harmony. But if you're in a depressed type of state, for instance, then you're in viparyarya vritti, means that your mind, the substance aspect, is moving very slowly. Picture like mud with water. It's thick. You sitting on a couch, you can't move. Everything seems dark to you. So yoga calls that wrong knowledge. Why? Because your interpretation is focused on yourself. You think the world is out to get you, when in fact it's your state. And that's the way you see things because of the modifications of the mind or the vritti. Not easy to comprehend, but how do you change this? So to get out of a tamasic state, you have to move into a rajasic state, make the modifications active. So for instance, with some of my students are martial artists, they get into a state like that. I tell them to start doing kicks and punches. Get off of the couch, get away from this, exert yourself. Then your vritti, the model, starts to change. You pull yourself out of a negative state into a more positive, active state. But in the first part, which is called Vikalpa, the Yoga Sutras call this butterfly mind. Like a butterfly jumps from flower to flower to flower. Picture yourself on your smartphone, scrolling, going from what do you call topic to topic or post to post. Then your mind is butterfly mind, not focused. Both in these 2 lower states of viparyarya and vikalpa, you can't meditate. You may think you can, but your mind isn't focused. So evolution has created something to help humanity. That's called work, going to work. When you go to work, you have to organize yourself. Your mind can't be jumping all around. You have to focus on your job. So that's the first type of focusing. Then your mind enters into what's called pramana. It's a shallow state, but the mind is organized. And when the mind is organized, then you can meditate. So our whole society, because of our jobs, doesn't matter if you're a bricklayer, you have to watch where you put the bricks, or whether you're working a computer, or whether you're a doctor, you become more focused. Everything in a certain aspect based on our evolution of humanity is a spiritual progress. So before you meditate, I teach my students they have to be in the state of pramana. So you can't be lethargic. You have to be disciplined. So if you enter into a deeper state, then the vritti changes into smriti. Smriti is like a deeper state, using a Gurdjieff term, self-remembering. you can touch your essence self through the right meditation, entering into Smriti, which makes your mind more, they call ekagra in Sanskrit, which means one-pointed. Then you're on the path. And that's the discipline to understand. So the key in the groups that we work on, that I work with, is more what's called an ancient teaching, Atma Vichara. Atma means self, but the essence, the real self. Vichara means inquiry, so self-inquiry. And that goes back to the ancient teaching of Hermes Trismegistus. Man, know thyself. Right? One comes out of ancient India. It's a Brahmanical teaching of Sanatana Dharma. For those that read about yogis, Sri Ramana Maharishi of India, that was his great teaching. Man, know thyself. Find the self. So that's what we work on, using these different techniques. In Gurdjieff teaching, or the fourth way, he hid the teaching, but he used Uspensky to give it out because Gurdjieff knew certain laws that you shouldn't give out certain hidden teachings because of the karma that it can affect. But the teaching on the 5 centers, your intellect, your emotions, but then it includes a movement center and then an instinctive center, and also he calls it the mysterious 5th center. But there's the number 5 again. In Buddhism, you have 5 skandhas. In yoga, the 5 vrittis, the 5 modifications of the mind, the 5 states of the mind, and here Gurdjieff, the 5 centers. There's a correlation here. In yoga, you have the instincts, what they call the pranas, or the Gyanendriyas and the Karmendriyas, that relate to his movement center. So understanding these 5 centers and how they make us do. One of the fallacies and the illusions is to overcome to the fact that we cannot do, that's Gurdjieff's words. Everything is done to us, primarily from past memory. So we have a movement center. Movement center on its lowest level pumps the blood, or makes the heart pump, circulates the blood, we breathe. We don't think about breathing. We don't think about our blood circulating. It's below our level of consciousness. But then when you ride a bicycle, when you first try to ride a bike when you're a kid, and it's difficult because you're learning balance, then you use a higher part of the movement center to coordinate. But then once you can do it and ride with no hands, then your movement center is operating on its own. So each of these centers has different levels. For instance, the intellectual center, on its lowest level, just you read things, you memorize it. On a higher level, what they call the emotional part of the intellectual center, then you enjoy studying. You can't wait to get deeper into your studies, whether you're making notes, reading, what have you. But then on the higher level of the intellectual center, then you have like an Einstein getting insights into the laws of our universe, or like relativity. So we study each of these centers with these vrittis to know ourselves in self-inquiry through meditation, self-observation, etc. And that makes a lot of discipline. So in my group that we have to be disciplined. Morning meditation, evening meditation, self-observation when you're at work, observing how your moods change in order to eventually get a grasp on them. So when somebody irritates you, you don't immediately go and get upset or angry. You separate, try and understand the changes and the modifications of the mind. So that's a bit complex nutshell.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about your teacher? You mentioned him briefly. I'm just
Sure.
wondering if you can talk a bit more about him and how he, I don't know, if inspired you on this in this work, maybe is the right word.
Yeah, but definitely did. When I first met him, he had a Mandela with him, which he called Atmavidya. So as soon as I saw that, something in me, said, whoa, this is something. I don't know. Didn't understand it, but the colors and everything. And Atma, again, meaning the greater self or the total self, Vidya means enlightened knowledge. So Atma Vidya. When Blavatsky was asked, what is theosophy? She answered, Atma Vidya. Atma Vidya is the synthesis of all the great knowledges of India. So my teacher, the first time I met him, there was only about 10 of us, and we met in a basement, talked about this Atma Vidya. When I came home, I was like charged. Like my movement center, we were just talking about just jumping all over the place. There was so much happening in me. I had no idea. So I stayed with him for 33 years. He passed away 12 years ago. And he went to India in 1970, let's say I was 77, 75. And everything that we have that is us is a compilation of the past. And he had an inspiration to go to South India. He was with his wife and child, and they had friends in North India. He let them stay with that other family, and he went to a place called Arunachala. Many people have heard of Mount Kailasa as a high spiritual point, but there are two. One is Mount Kailasa, the other is Arunachala, which is a small, they like to call it a mountain, but it's a hill. But it has a vast spiritual legacy going back centuries. And he started doing tapas there. Tapas is Gurdjieff calls it super effort, making a super effort. So most people, when they go there, I've been there a couple of times, do what's called pradakshana. Pradakshana is you wake up very early in the morning and in a meditative state, you circumambulate the mountain. It takes several hours, I forget. You're supposed to do it in bare feet, but the ground gets really hot. I wore sandals. Anyways, but he did prostrations, something like 1,000 a day, chanting to Lord Shiva. This is another home of Lord Shiva, is Arunachala. Um, and then he got a boon from Shiva. A boon, he called it the Aruna star after Arunachala, a symbol. And from that symbol, when he came back home, I remember when he was explaining, again, there was a small group sitting in a friend's apartment, and he explained what happened to him. Then I had the first experience that he passed Shakti and knowledge psychically, could feel it. I don't know how to explain it, but he felt uplifted and taken almost to where he was in India as he was explaining his experiences. So for quite a few years, we worked on chanting and doing prostrations using this symbol. It has a symbol of a star, one, two, three, a six-pointed star, but at the center was a Shiva lingam. So if you study other teachings like Alice A. Bailey and understand the seven rays, it was a first ray teaching. It was intense. Anyways, in 1977, I went to India. And if you read my book, I explain about an experience that I had at a place of Ramakrishna. It's called Balurmath. And I entered in Samadhi. And I was shown that the path for me was related on the second ray with Avalokiteshvara, what the Tibetans call Chenrezig. So when I came back to Toronto, of course, I told my teacher, he's still doing Shiva. He loves Shiva. But then after being home for a while, I was in a downtown part of Toronto, walking by an antique store, and that antique store called me in. And inside, I found a very old statue of Avalokiteshvara, about 3 feet in high. And they wanted like $1,500 or something like, which was an exorbitant amount of money at that time for this statue. But it radiated something. Anyways, told my teacher about it, and he thought the idea was good. So we collected money from everyone we could. And one of guy was a lawyer making more money than most. And we bought this statue. And we were having a group meeting, and we just had it on the floor, and I was sitting in front of it. And all of a sudden, I started to feel very uncomfortable. And I kept looking behind me. Just I felt goosebumps and uncomfortable. I told my teacher, this statue is not happy, doesn't like where it's been put. Just odd. It was a black statue with 11 heads and 8 arms, beautifully sculpted face. The faces were beautiful, inlaid with what's it called, turquoise and coral. So we decided to move it and built an altar and lit incense, and then it was happy. And I started to tell my teacher, I think our path is more this, not Shiva, second ray, related to love wisdom versus he just wanted to cut through all nonsense, go to enlightenment, to reach a higher state. And that for the next few years, there was turmoil as we moved back and forth. Then he had a dream. In that dream, he saw, I'm not going to go into the detail, but the path of Shiva is for advanced individuals that want to be sannyasi, wanderers, like in India or Tibet. It is not for the modern world, not for the deeper path. And then we moved and started chanting Om Mani Padme Hum to Avalokiteshvara. Then, not long after that, there were a lot of psychic happenings around the house. I had rented this huge house, 3 floors, really old house. We all lived together. We all had jobs. My teacher was a flavor chemist. He created flavors for ice cream, pop, candies. He had an amazing sense of smell, and he was a great cook. Then one night, I experienced the master Rakasi. And I told my teacher, this master came. And he said, that's unusual. We have nothing to do. He's a seventh ray. We're more Master DK, the Tibetan master, and Master KH. We didn't think anything of it, and that was that. 2 weeks later, he was on vacation. He was going to Virginia Beach, to the Edgar Cayce area for vacation. And he had a dream. In the dream, the Master Rakasi appeared to him and gave him a word of power. And he woke up. He was sleeping with his daughter and his wife, but couldn't wake his wife up. But he woke up his daughter, and they're chanting. The master gave him this tune, a special tune for this mantra. Anyways, jumping along, eventually he came back and he taught this tune to a small group that we had. It was difficult. It took me 2 years to get it. It can only be chanted if you're in essence. Personality chants goes wrong. It had a high energy and it would connect you to the ashram of the Master Rakasi. So from that, a teaching or a tantra of Avalokiteshvara awakened. First, we went and visited, we knew some lamas. Can't remember. One Lama Karmatinli, he was a good Lama living in Toronto. There was another younger Lama who was more Aquarian. I can't think of his name right now. And we discussed about Avalokiteshvara and this tantra. They didn't know anything about it. They didn't know anything. They just, Lord of love and compassion, and you prayed to him, but they had no clue. Karma Tinley was a very knowledgeable Lama. I think it was Kargyupa. Anyway, and the other Lama, I can't remember, but he was Galup. And we tried to find, but we developed this whole unique, again, the packaging changing, ancient Tantra of Avalokiteshvara. Then a strange thing happened. I was at that time a high school teacher, art film teacher, but I was forced to teach one English class. I'm not a good English, yeah, of course it's my mother tongue, but English grammar and all, I was never very good in that in school. Anyways, one day I have the kids working at the blackboard, and some kid starts waving around, sir, Carol, this other lady, wrote a strange word on the blackboard. So I look at it and it's Atma, a 16-year-old kid. She said, I don't know, it came to me, this word. Atma? Sanskrit? So eventually I took her to my teacher. And then he found very quickly that he was inspired that she was a disciple of the master Serapis, an Egyptian master, also in the Theosophical line. When he mentioned his name, immediately there was a manifestation in the meditation room where we were. And the master Serapis appeared in his Devic form. And this little girl passed out. She went into a samadhi. Anyways, then through her, certain forces months later started to manifest. And my teacher had to deal with these ancient past forces and how to apply the Tantra of Avalokiteshvara to overcome them. And with that, his knowledge and abilities, what they call mantra shakti, began to awaken. Then we were inspired to the second half of this Tantra. So Avalokiteshvara is male. We need the female, which is white Tara. And then he was inspired with an esoteric mantra for the white Tara, bringing the two into a unity and finishing the Tantra. That lasted for years, and then different ordeals. He wanted to create a school, an occult school. If you're reading Letters on Occult Meditation, it talks about schools of the future. But the masters didn't allow him. He ended up having to work on the inner plane, developing his mantra shakti. And then as he awakened further over the years, not only different advanced beings came, but deities. And he was guided. We used to do these different kinds of rituals in order to do, I can't tell, it's too esoteric, but to overcome certain forces that were impacting on humanity. Then his daughter had a kid, a young kid. Well, obviously, I'm saying, but around 6 years old, this kid decided to ask, do you guys see all these different beings all over the place? We said, no. Sometimes we see. Well, I see them all over, all the time. turned out to be very clairvoyant. And then some great beings, as he got older, when he was younger, they were smaller beings. But as he got older, greater beings started using his body and advancing our teaching. And that went on for quite a number of years. Um, and sort of the body of the teaching, again, Yoga Sutras, he taught a lot in the Yoga Sutras. At first, when we first started, a lot of Gurdjieff and the Sanatana Dharma, we did what's called Shiva Siddhanta, which I don't remember a lot, but then moved to Avalokiteshvara, Vajrayana, and the five Dhyani Buddhas, or the Buddhas of transformation, and theosophical knowledge. And he passed away, as I said, about 12 years ago. And I was told to write a book earlier by actually one of the masters, and my teacher said he was working on one, but he died first, and therefore I wrote the book. And there's a lot on my teacher, all about what I just discussed, but more in detail in my book. Coming of the master, being in India, different India trips, and the ordeal. He went through a great ordeal. It took 10 years. And that occult ordeal, after that 10 years, he had powers, what they call siddhis. When you came into his place, he wouldn't see many people, only his closer, well, he only had a few the students. He would cook and chant, make an offering of the food to a deity. Then you would eat it. It's called prasad. You could feel something changing inside of you, like electricity. You could feel him enter into your mind. He helped remove, in yoga, they call it the klesas. Klesas are like psychological knots left over from past lives that create hindrances in your efforts to meditate, understand. He could remove them. You could chant a couple of times, you could feel your head change. So he had these abilities, but it was very difficult for him. He couldn't go out. When he went out, if, like he would say, he'd drive, he'd go, once he retired from his job. And if he had to stop to fill up for gas, he used to have to wait until the gas station was empty. He found if somebody else was filling gas, even if he didn't know them, didn't talk to them, call it astral pollution that's in their subconscious, jumped and went right into him, and he had to clean it up. And that might take him another hour, sometimes, depending on what it was. So we learned, and that's the very esoteric part, what really makes up a human being from their past lives, the astral qualities of the different stratas of the subplanes and what's in them, the type of beings, all because he just pierced through as he wanted to when he was much younger doing Lord Shiva, but pierced through into this deeper esoteric knowledge that certain aspects of it cannot be shared only within the brotherhood or the ashram. So he was a great being, but only had 7, 8 students. There was one time when he said his guru came, and I remember being there, and he could feel that whoever this being, his aura filled the entire house. And my teacher asked me to go to the basement to look for a particular picture that was packed away. And I was amazed that even I'm in the basement, I was feeling this being, like he permeated. And he just called him what did he call him? He was a Brahma Rishi, pardon me, Brahma Rishi, I forgot. He was a Brahma Rishi. There are Rishi, Maharishi, and Brahma Rishi. And that he was thousands of years old. And that was near his death that this being came. It was extraordinary. So if you buy my book, Living on the Inner Edge, there is a lot in there. Plus all of this teaching to the degree, because I remember writing the book and asking inwardly, what am I allowed to write? Because of some of the ideas of these forces, these what they call, Tibetan master calls involutionary forces, and how they impact on humanity. And many interesting things. One I'll tell you that's interesting, the experience that he had. He went to Egypt, and there are a lot of powerful negative forces there. I've been there, I've felt them, but I didn't challenge them. He challenged them. He saw, my memory being correct, that there's ancient magical magic still there in the atmosphere. But Islam came in order to put a dampening, this is very esoteric, dampening force, because Islam doesn't believe in anything like that. Christianity and Judaism has some magic in it, but Islam not. And that force is sort of like a damper pushing down, but the stuff breaks through. Thus, there's always the turmoil in the Middle East, is because of this ancient magic. I thought that was fascinating.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. So he had that experience. I remember explaining it.
Can you give us any insight or characterize um, the impact, the how crucial was your teacher and his spiritual development for you and your work and like all of what you're talking about?
Extremely crucial. It's what they call the golden chain of Hermes, or in the Kargyupa, the whispered lineage. So they call the energy, we use the term Shakti, the divine blood, so to speak, is passed through everything that is occurring with my present group is a result of everything from my teacher. Same masters have again come with a few more. Um, Teaching has gone deeper, but his knowledge is still way beyond much greater than my own. Uh,
So, so from your side, what is required in order to maintain that link now that he's no longer incarnated?
Staying in, using the term I used before, staying in your essence. If you're in soul alignment, then it's continued. Tell a little secret, but I won't tell too much about it. He's reincarnated. He's an 11-year-old girl, and I know them. They came back to me. I won't say who or what, but it's very strange. He's born in the same sign as me with the same moon and rising sign.
Fascinating. Um, I don't, it's probably not a question that I would choose to ask if it was just you and I speaking, but I know that there's people listening who are of particular ideological or theological persuasions, and they would, they might want some sort of, I don't know, justification or explanation or like how would you respond to those who would say something like, well, you can take the pith of of a teaching or a tradition and you can take methods and combine them in a sort of a smorgasbord sort of a manner, which is not what I believe that you're doing here. But like how do you respond to people who are generally critical of what they would call like new age type practices and teachings because they're not ancient or they're not based on a single lineage or they're not like a continual stream, which I think, from most Westerners is ridiculous on its face, but regardless, I still hear this pretty constantly.
So do I. I haven't run into it in a while because I'm almost a hermit now. I'm getting older. I don't get out that much, so I have nowhere to go unless I travel. Because I work at home, do my stuff. But I used to run into. I remember tell a little story. I was in India, North India, in Darjeeling, and there was quite a well-known Lama there, Karlu Rinpoche.
Yeah.
A lot of people knew him and thought him enlightened. But I had my own little hut. I rented a hut not far. And I met this 80-year-old nun from a very wealthy Tibetan family. If you've ever read the biography of Govinda, Anarika Govinda, and his story of Tomo Geshe Rinpoche, and how he had met Tomo Geshe Rinpoche, was found by this old family in Tibet in the valley of Tomo Valley. That's
Yeah.
why he was named Tomo Geshe Rinpoche. This 80-year-old nun was a little kid of that family. And she was wealthy and she was supporting Karlu Rinpoche and supporting his entire monastery. She had a hotel in Darjeeling, and at the top of the hotel, and the reason I took it when I came there, because that was in 1980, there's no internet, and I just came to Darjeeling and saw this hotel with, oh, has a temple on it. I'm gonna try and stay at this place. And uh, the guy at the desk said, "Are you interested in Buddhism?" I said, "Yeah." "Want to meet my mom?" So went up to this little temple and we just connected. And she's like 80, but she's fluent in English. And anyway, she said, "You want to go to a Tibetan monastery and meet my guru, at present guru?" And she told me the huge difference she had seen Tomo Geshe Rinpoche. Said, gurus or the lamas today are not anywhere near Tomo Geshe Rinpoche. He was an advanced initiate. She said some of them are good. So, I went and met Karlu Rinpoche, and she arranged for him to do an empowerment personally for me. But this is 1980. I only just started chanting Om Mani Padme Hum, and he did a Chenrezig empowerment. And a whole bunch of lamas and me, her, and him. And when it was over, he asked me, "Well, how was it?" "Oh, it was nice. Well, it was okay." Maybe I was a bit arrogant. I don't know. Anyways, so I stayed in the hotel and eventually I got a little cabin. I wanted to do meditation there. Turned out I'm from Toronto. There were a bunch of other people from Toronto. And this one guy, I don't know how he ended up in my place, or somebody told him about me. He came and visited, and he was doing his foundation prostrations. I don't know, and I think Karlu Rinpoche is Kargyupa. A lot of them do this foundation, 100,000 prostrations,
Yeah.
all the way where you
Hmm.
lie down. And he wasn't doing well. He was not healthy. And I said, "Well, stop." He says, "No, but Lama will be angry with me." But he's also, upset I'm not well. He doesn't want me to stay. And I said, "That's not compassionate." And I was very, very, and there was another lady. Her story is really interesting. And she's also from Toronto. She was a well-known dancer, but she got throat cancer. And she had made quite a bit of money, and she traveled the world to get see what doctors would say if they be, and they all gave her 6 months to live. But so she came to Karlu Rinpoche and she became a nun, shaved her head, she beautiful, dancer, imagine beautiful woman, shaved her head, put on nun robes, and she was 2 years later without any medicine, she was okay. But then as she started to get sick, he wanted her to leave. He didn't want any of this. And that sort of upset me. Um, so these lamas are, I never seem to have a real connection with them and with that particular teaching. And if I tried to explain my teaching, I found what is it, the students of these lamas, there was no connection. They didn't seem to understand. And yet I would like to go to the temples because I like the altars. There's what's it called? Dharma Chakra in Woodstock, New York. There's a beautiful Tibetan temple there. And I had started going there before they built the temple, but they had a house and there are numerous lamas there. But their students didn't seem to know anything. And yet there was a good feeling. There was a beautiful statue of Chenrezig, the Buddhas, of course. And I enjoyed going there. But then they started to change, and eventually they asked me not to come back. But they started to become more rigid. So I found that there's a big separation from what I teach and the traditions. And those people who follow the tradition, it's fine. Some, we became friends, but they're not ready for this level to go to the pith. They want the whole package. And the same with the yoga, people doing yoga. I went to different ashrams of Shivananda. Eh, I know there's several in Canada. There's one on Paradise Island in the Bahamas. And he, through Vishnu Devananda, started them up in the late 70s. And I went also with some of the yogis from Yogaville, Sachidananda. That's going back quite a ways, though. But it was all very different. Um, and I don't push what I teach. And fortunately, I can converse in just about any tradition, even the Zen, and I enjoy the Zen traditions. But I find that the Zen is not real Zen. I've been to quite a number in upper state New York and Rochester, the Zen Center, etc. It's good, but it doesn't go deep as it should go. I remember meeting, the guy that started the Zen Center. He wrote Three Pillars of Zen. Can't remember his name. He married a Canadian, and we had a discussion. And he's dead now. Philip Keplo, that was his name. He wrote a number of books. And he had studied in Burma. He had an interesting life. But when we talked, and he was actually amazed. He says, I've never run into anything like this before. So, but he's, as I said, he's passed away, but the Zen centers in Rochester are supposed to be still functioning. I don't know. So, we each have our own little niche or place. And I enjoy going to temples and everything. I usually don't talk that much.
What would you say is sort of the essence of your mission for people who maybe you know, looking to become spiritual aspirants, but not certain where to go or and if you could clarify like what it is exactly that you and your school offers that is really, I think, in some ways distinct and different than many others.
It's not an easy question to answer. The Tibetan master mentions that groups in this Aquarian or beginning of the Aquarian age come together based on karmic links from the past and ashramic necessity. It's the best I can quote it. Thus, so far, those who come have a direct link to this school. That's why they're not many,
Mm,
15 or give or take. And then some that just come to the full moons and stuff and never see them again. So those that have a direct karmic link are advanced already. They may not know it. My job is to prepare, as I mentioned, most of them are in their early 30s, to prepare them to develop this teaching further when they become 40, 50, and 60. I'm too old already. I hope if somehow I'm not rich, that if there was a bequeath that I could buy yeah, a house, a big house, and create a center. And I just live in a rented house right now. My house, nice size, but it's small and rented. Because houses are a ridiculous price. Small house is $1 million and change in this city. And I don't have that in my back pocket at the moment. So if a center could be built and then these individuals continue, um, I'm 76. How many more years would I live? Maybe 83, 84. I don't know. So my job, just as my teacher's job, was to prepare so they have a good grasp both of their essence to what we call building a center of awareness, and they recognize the separate essence versus the personality, and to transform their personality to be what the Tibetan master calls a soul infused personality versus a personality trying to reach the soul, but they know their soul, know their past lives, know their weaknesses, and have started the transformation of it, which is called overcoming the dweller on the threshold, and recognize there are certain esoteric aspects there that are not written in books, but have achieved that and can carry on this teaching because the teaching is in its pioneer stage. And just like when the pioneers came to North America, had to chop down trees and clear the land. Well, chopping down trees and clearing the land and making it more habitable and making the teaching through a couple of books and my students. So it has a fertile ground to grow. And the esoteric teaching, the deeper esoteric teaching, is not for everyone, but it's a necessity because it helps to counter the forces of materialism. It creates, like I saw it once, like in a vision, shafts of light cutting through the dense fogs of the astral pollution of humanity. And humanity grows slowly. And right now, we're going to go through a very difficult period in Europe, North America, maybe the world. As if you look at the beginning of Aquarius, if you look at the symbol of Aquarius, it's not two smooth lines, but jagged lines. And you try to rub them together, it means friction. Aquarius is friction and unusual and disruptive. And at its later stage, will be more enlightening. But initially, it'll be disruptive and lots of friction. And we see that undergoing now. But it's at that time that the esoteric teaching comes out even more. So that's what I'm trying to do. I don't have any real set goals. I listen inwardly and I'm given directions. And right now, my directions are to have a couple of online teaching. Plus, I have a full moon. We meet every month at the Toronto Taoist Tai Chi Center. It was a nice center. They rent it to us, very reasonable, and it's conducive to meditation. I may do more there. They're good people. I've also do Tai Chi there.
Cyrus, can you remind people where they can find you online?
Sure. So, um, Northern School of Esoteric Wisdom, www.northernschoolofelsotericwisdom.com. There's quite a few pages there. It's been there for some time. I get a lot of hits. There is a contact page. There's also a donate page. I never ask money. None of my students pay me. Everything, when I do full moons, I do everything. There is no request for money. There is a donation box if you wish to give, which is Dana Paramita, giving from the heart. That helps pay for the rent, pay for advertising, pay for the website, people that look after it. That's great. But none of the things that we do is there any request for money. Money is only given from the heart to help. Blavatsky was the same. She never would accept money for teaching. She made money through writing and selling her articles to travel agencies, to travel parts of newspapers. I don't ask for any money in any respect. So people can contact me, but it's up to them to contact and to ask if it's meant
Well,
for them.
thank you. We appreciate you spending some time with us today, Cyrus, and explaining a lot about your school, your life, your teaching, your teacher. It's been very interesting to reflect on. And one of the things I constantly come back to is that there are such a wide variety of esoteric spiritual schools and teachers and like ways of learning and practicing that are out there because there's so many different types of people. And like you said, there's karmic links, I guess, and maybe that's the most important thing.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Everything is karma. Everything. You're walking on the street and you actually bump into somebody. That's karma. It didn't just happen by accident. Did you ever hear the story? I don't know if we have a few more minutes and
Mm.
stuff. One day, a disciple of the Buddha came across the Buddha, and the Buddha was sitting with his hands in his head, going, oh, oh, oh. And the disciple said, what's wrong? He says, I've had a headache for 3 days. The disciple, had a headache for 3 days? You're the Buddha. And the Buddha said, well, long ago in one of my lives, thousands of years ago, I was a little boy in a village. And at the center of the village was a pond with fish, and we used to go fishing there. But once upon a time in this village, there came a drought, and the drought was terrible, and the water started to evaporate. And before you know it, you start to see the fish splashing around in the shallow water. Well, one day I took a stick and went and hit a fish 3 times on the head. Everything is karma. I love that story.
Thank you, Cyrus.
You're most welcome. Pleasure
Appreciate you.
talking with you and sharing.